I'm on page 3 of your class packet. And first, we're going to start by reviewing the segment addition postulate, which is basically telling us that the two smaller segments added together equals the length of the entire thing. So for this question, it's just asking me to solve for x. So I'm going to take 5 plus the 2x plus 6 equals the length of the entire thing, which is x plus 10. Once I set up the equation, I then solve for x. And again, for the sake of time, I'm just going to tell you when you do that, you get x equals -1. And you're finished because that's all it asked us to do. That's what we did yesterday. Now we're going to move on. A couple things we need to review, like definition-wise, before we can move on to the new thing, is what the word congruent means. Congruent means equal. So it's the same length, it's the same measure if you're talking about an angle. And the symbol for congruent is an equal sign, but it has this little, squiggly line above it. I'm sure there's a technical name for it, but I don't know at the moment. So that's what this symbol is for congruent. And we use the word congruent because we're talking about measurements in geometry. Not just like the answer is 7. That's an equal sign in algebra. This we're talking about they're the same length or measure. So that's what these symbols here mean, that they're equal to each other or congruent. Now, the second thing we got to review are what these little markings mean. These little markings are called tick marks. Basically, these marks tell you they're the same length. So for example, AB and CD are congruent, these two segments, because they have the same number of tick marks. They each have 1, so that means they're the same length. PQ and RS are congruent to each other because they have the same tick marks. They both have 2 lines, so since they have 2 lines, that means they're the same length. So for example, if this one had 1 and this one had 2, those would not be congruent because they don't have the same number of marks. Same with angles. So angle TUV is equal to XYZ because they have the same number of tick marks. Or these are called arc marks because we're talking about an angle now. So since they both have 1, they're congruent. Same with this one. These two angles are equal because they both have 2 arcs. If this one had 2 and this one had 1, they would not be the same measure because they don't have the same number of markings. So you have to know that before we can move on to the next section, which is going to be the angle addition postulate. So I'm just going to go through some of these examples here. So in this first example, there are 3 angles within this big one. There's angle CBD, which I'm just going to trace it out and to label that. Remember where the angle opens up, that letter has to go in the middle. So CBD is one of the angles. Another one would be DBA. And then the big one, the overall angle, is CBA. Those are all 3 angles. What this tells us is that if I add the 2 smaller angles together, it's going to equal the measure of the big angle. I need to know that information in order to do the examples below. So in this first one, this M means measure. So this is read as the measure of angle KLM, and I'm just going to trace it, KLM. So that's the measure of the entire angle. That's what it wants us to find. If the measure of KLB, so I'm going to trace that out, KLB, so that's this angle right here, is 26 degrees, and the measure of BLM is 60 degrees, again, what is the measure of the entire thing? Well, that would be 26 plus 60, which gives us 86. So the answer is 86 degrees. In the next example, it says find the measure of angle FGH. So I'm just going to trace this as the order that's written. It starts at F. So FGH, that's the measure of the entire angle. So that's what we need to find. They give us that measure of angle FGB, so FGB is 105, and BGH is 54. Again, what is the measure of the entire angle? Well, that'd be 105 plus 54, which is 159 degrees. This next one's gonna be a little different because we have X involved, so we're gonna have to solve this time. So it says find the measure of YCD. Okay, that's not the entire angle this time, but that's what we're trying to find. So I'm gonna put a little question mark on it. It tells us that that angle, YCD, is represented by 69x plus 2. Again, I don't know what the actual measure is. That's what I'm going to find out in the end, but that's what it's represented by. Angle BCD, which is the entire thing, is 168 degrees. And measure of angle BCY, which is the smaller one, is represented by 15x minus 2. So now that I've labeled everything, I'm going to set up an equation and solve for x so that I can get the answer for this angle. So remember, the two smaller angles add together to make the big angle. So 15x minus 2 plus 69x plus 2 equals the entire thing, which is 168. Again, just to save some time, when you solve that, you get x equals 2. Now I got to go back and actually answer the question. It says find the measure of angle YCD. So YCD was represented by 69x plus 2. To find what that actual measure is, I'm going to plug 2 in for x, and 69 times 2 plus 2 is 140. So the measure of that angle is 140 degrees.